Hi everyone, it's Manda here and welcome back to Resilience at Sea. And today I'm really excited to introduce you to a dear friend and colleague of mine and someone I plan on doing a lot more work with in the future, Gary. And Gary is a former scientist, an ambulance officer, international mountain guide, engineer, I believe. He is now a coach, a teacher, an expedition medicine instructor, a course facilitator, and still an international mountain guide, and specializes in heli skiing in Alaska. He's a global nomad. He's based in Alaska, I believe, but also lives and continues to visit Tasmania, New Zealand, basically wherever you have something exciting going on in the world, Gary can be there. And so we met teaching expedition medicine courses. But before I go on, I think, Gary, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, thanks, man. That was a great introduction already. I often simplify things to say that I'm a decision maker, and that people pay me to make consequential decisions for them in complex, high-risk environments. And that avoids the whole, oh, you're a heli ski guide thing. But without a doubt, I find heli skiing is my most challenging environment for decision making. I guess the context that I've learned to make decisions has been mainly in the form of snow safety, guiding, and emergency medicine at a reduced level, just of a ambulance officer. But I find all those fields, I can transfer the context to other fields really well. And without a doubt, I learned from medicine, aviation industry, firefighting industry, and other frontline industries, and how they work to mitigate risk, manage teams, manage themselves. And I apply those things into my fields, and super passionate about performing better, being able to be resilient, and helping others along on that journey. Hence the coaching and facilitating I've done recently. So I think you got into the more specifics. And I often look at it as big picture. What am I really doing? Why am I tired at the end of the day? And then I think, oh yeah, I made a few decisions today and I'm glad they were right.
I think everyone should stop and do that at the end of the day. That's fantastic. So we connected teaching an expedition medicine course, and the first course we taught together, you basically introduced me to Ian Snape and the Resilience by Design work, and you did the most amazing talk on leadership and resilience, and it completely blew me away. And I think you are probably responsible about changing the trajectory of my life, because it made me realize how important it was to bring this information to my community, to yachting, high performance sailing, and the super yachts. So why resilience and leadership? Why? You've obviously been a natural leader in going down the course of your life, but why did you decide to talk about that? What got you interested?
The interest happened from a few different ways. At quite an early age, I lost a friend while just the two of us were kayaking in a remote environment. And that gave me a different perspective on risk that most people probably don't get in their 20s. When all of a sudden you go, hey, my decisions have consequences and they can go wrong really fast in a matter of seconds. So started there, and then realized that the profession that I got into, which I found interacted with people more in guiding was way more complex purely because of the people. Science was a lot easier. And I needed to get those people on board because my preferred leadership style is to have a team approach and have everybody thinking, everybody sensing, everybody aware of what's going on. And so everybody has the option to contribute. And that doesn't always work with all groups. So some groups just want me to show them a good time for the day, and that's fine. I can do that. If that's the type of group I'm on, we can't really reach our full potential. Like, I might exceed their expectations, and that's fine, but I know what's possible. And it's the groups that I can get on board, and we can work together as a team, and we're all growing as well as having an amazing experience. That's the sort of group that energizes me, makes it worth me being exhausted at the end of the day, but we're exceeding our expectations. And even though we're in a risky environment, we're doing it at a much safer level, because instead of one set of eyes, ears, and one person sensing, I've got 4 or 5 people with me, and we all trust each other. We can all communicate well. And I'm making most of the decisions, but at the same time, I've got total confidence in them that they'll let me know if they're sensing something different. Or occasionally I'll give them an option. You know, what do you think? You want to go here, or should we go to this other valley? So the question was, why is resilience important? And I got into a little bit more leadership, but the resilience is important in that it's a proactive step that helps you communicate and be comfortable making decisions. It's all the habits and strategies you've put in place, as well as the resources you've got, so that you can go out into that consequential environment and feel way more comfortable about what nature's throwing at you, because it's very rare that nature surprises us that much. We have good weather forecasts now, and within the realm of possibility, there can be surprises for sure. But most of our surprises probably come more from humans, and not just the humans around us, but often ourselves too. So back to resilience, I think one of the most important things is awareness. And initially, that's awareness of yourself, as well as awareness of others. And then, of course, the big context or situation that you're either put into, or most of the time you've chosen to be put into that situation, at least to some extent. So yeah, I think so much of resilience can be proactive and can be trained. And part of resilience is getting better at it. So I guess we started saying, you know, you contemplate at the end of the day what's going on, and that's a resilient strategy. Yeah. Contemplate what you've done. How is it serving you? What could you have done differently or better? You know, and you can do that again on your own, as well as with others, to get a different perspectives. And super valuable. Keeps you curious, keeps you growing, and keeps everyone engaged.
I love that. So something that a couple of conversations I've had recently when I've been talking about the work that I'm doing, that we're doing, and my excitement about it, is a couple of people have said to me, oh, I think I've learned enough resilience over the years doing whatever it is that's got them to that. And obviously we both work with some pretty extreme people, and have had extreme experiences at sea, in the mountains, in the wilderness. So if I was to say that to you now, what would your answer be?
I think my answer would be a question.
Mm-hmm.
It would probably be something like, and what type of resilience is that? Because does that just mean they've hardened up and become callous to the situations they're in? And if so, they might be resilient, but is that a long-term solution? Becoming callous could also mean you're at increased risk. Maybe you've just been lucky. Because you're calloused, you're not paying nearly as much attention to the decisions you're making, or all the subtle signals that you could be getting. You're not getting them anymore because you're calloused over. And if you are kind of that hardened up or calloused over, where are you going to be? How's that going to look for you in 10 years or in 20 years? Do you have an exit strategy, or do you feel that your current, what you say is resilient, is that going to work for the next 10, 20 years? Is it really holistically healthy? And since I don't know what kind of resilience it is for those people, if they've got a curious mind and they're into growth and learning, then it could be a great resilient strategy for them. And they might say, yep, this really high intensity yachting is going to get me to see the world. I'm going to be able to do it for another 10 years. And I've got these plans in so that I can move on to a different career, different field, or a different role within that career. And then I would go, that is awesome. That's the type of resilience we want to promote also. Like, you've pre-planned, you're thinking ahead, probably not covering all the possibilities. Like, you're thinking ahead 10 years. What if you get an injury in 1 or 2 that changes that? But those resilient people may have thought of all that too.
On that note, that got me thinking that our lives, I think, in terms of the people I understand and connect to the most, and can really sit in a bar and have a few drinks way past bedtime with, other mountain guides, because what we have in common is there's no ambulances where we go, and we're all there going hard, fast, with being very careful. Everyone thinks we're wild and crazy, but the boats I sail on are very careful boats, because we know that when something goes wrong, it will go really wrong, and the ambulance will not be there in 5, 10, 15 minutes, maybe even 15 hours. And you guys in the mountains, and I know you've done an awful lot of sailing and time at sea as well, get that. So if I had been on a Sydney Hobart race, and we'd had a catastrophic situation where someone had a major injury, it could be a broken femur on the bow with a couple of failed helicopter retrievals, and then having to secure that person and bring them back to shore. And I'm a hardy sailor. I've done, hundreds of thousands of miles, or tens of thousands of miles. Where I think there's a lack in my particular industry, and I don't know about yours, is intervention in terms of stress management to reduce post-traumatic stress in our team, in our crew, in our community, and inspire post-traumatic growth. And I feel like a lot of the time when we have these injuries, we all can fix a person. Most of us are highly trained. Well, I hope you all are. I'm not trying to promote myself, but if you're watching this and you, because of me, you've probably had really great medical training and you can save a life. You can do CPR, you can stop an arterial bleed, you can reduce a broken fracture better than most, you know, better than some nurses, doctors, paramedics. But where we're lacking is, you know, this, you have this stress and then this stress and then this stress. So do you think there's an area lacking in the world of sport and extreme sports and remote, harsh environments in terms of stress management? You know, if we haven't had the resilience training and leadership training leading up to it, what do we do after? What are the options?
Great you brought that up. And communications are really prevalent now in outdoor industries for awareness of kind of what you're terming is post-event stress. And they offer a few solutions, talking about it, meeting up with people, and particularly then finding a professional therapist if you need. I believe we can minimize a whole lot of that proactively by making the situations better. And I think you were optimistic when you were saying how long it might be before like a professional rescue team comes. I thought you were going to move to the 15 days. I think that's actually pretty realistic now that yachts are going down to Antarctica. They're going on the Northwest Passage. So it's the fact that any sort of outside assistance hands-on can be a long time is super real. The fact that you'll have communications very quickly is also super real. And so you can use that to your advantage. But proactively, I guess I would say whatever situation is that is going to provide stress or promote a stressful response afterwards, the better that situation is managed, the less likelihood there's going to be of prolonged adverse effects. So in addition to stopping a severe bleed and things like that, with our first aid, let's talk about how we interact with each other, how we're going to look after our emotions and support both ourselves and our teams during that event. And if the event happens on a city street and is over in 10 minutes because you've called emergency services, then maybe there's been a very little chance for that additional first aid and caring for the whole crew and the whole team. But if you're looking at a response where you're looking after the situation, everybody's basic needs for 5 to 15 days, significantly different. And I guess I'd like to take a little step sideways for just comparing what it's like to be crew on a yacht or a guide versus another frontline worker, say an ambulance officer, a paramedic, the ER doctor, in that your mental preparatory state for going to work as a doctor in the emergency room or a paramedic, I automatically know what I'm getting into. I'm going to see sick people. I'm going to see injured people. There might be some little differences, but I can be mentally prepared. When the pager goes off, when the bell and the PA system announces something, I've already prepped for that, because when I woke up, I left my home and I've gone to work with that in mind. Now, when I take people out heli skiing, I'm there to give them a safe, good time. I am not expecting a disaster. It's not unheard of. I've trained for it, but that happens, luckily, probably less than 1% of my days. The yachting, the same thing. You're there to give your guests the time of their life, do everything you can to make them happy, keep the boat running, make everything as good as possible. And, how often do you end up with a disaster or some event that's going to possibly create adverse stress down the line? It's less than 1% of the time. So one of the significant things proactively to do is be aware of that. What state are you going to work at? How is that going to work? And then what do you need to do to be resilient and to manage your team when all of a sudden something's gone wrong? It's not your normal state. You haven't gone to work expecting that. So immediately you need to change to what the conditions are. And that's that awareness of yourself, other people. You may need to help other people change. Some other people may be ready to help. Others may just need to back away and be in the corner for a little bit. So maybe you have them prepare lunch. Just stay away for a little while. So that awareness of yourself, others, and then obviously the event that's happened, the situation. And we can train for that. Outcomes are way better if we train for that. And we can train for how do we then bring the people back in, because lots of studies have shown that kind of that grief or the feeling like I should have done something is worse if people aren't actively involved. Like the people who are actively doing CPR usually feel kind of okay, even if the outcome wasn't good at the end of that event. Whereas somebody who's frozen or couldn't actually participate often has more lingering doubts about that. So we can train people to be aware of all those things. And luckily, they come in when time isn't super critical. Like you mentioned, the saving a life, that happens in a real short time. But what if we've saved the life, but now we're waiting the 4 or 5 days for advanced care? That's when all of a sudden you go, we need to look after the team. We've got more going on than we had before. It's not just a luxury cruise anymore. We're looking after ourselves as well as our patient. And then after the patient leaves, we're still looking after ourselves. And then you're making decisions like, does the cruise continue? How are we altering our course? And that's probably the most big picture. How are we altering our course? Not just to the yacht.
Yeah, I call it the $1 million question. Do we stop, stabilize them? Do we turn the boat around and go back to port? Or do we keep on going? There's so many factors that come in, but something I really want to emphasize that you brought up there that I speak about a lot, and I think that is one of the main reasons I'm here today. As a trauma nurse, when I go into emergency, I'm wearing scrubs and I've got a stethoscope around my neck and I'm ready for carnage. I in a kind of weird medical way, I want it because otherwise it'll be a boring shift. And I've got no connection. Maybe when I worked in, small towns that I grew up in, I might get a cousin of my grandmother's or something come through the door, or a distant relative that you may look after, but rarely, not that sort of thing. When we're on a boat, I'm there to, trim a sail. or you could be there as the captain or the tactician or the officer, chief officer, the engineer, the stewardess, managing interior, serving guests. You're focused on that job. Then there's a major incident and you literally have to swap hats. And I couldn't believe the energy that it took to switch hats as a professional medic and a professional wilderness medic that's an expert in my field that teaches it. But in a number of situations after the event, I'd be lying in bed and I've got adrenaline streaming and I'm like, why do I feel like this? When have I last felt like this? Last time I felt like, and I'm like, I feel like a drink or something, you know, what do I need? And I was like, well, last time I felt like this was when I resuscitated a child in emergency that was traumatic. And I went and got, you know, they made us all have counselling for, and I thought, why do I feel like that then when someone just broke their arm out sailing today? And it took me a few years to work out that it was the switching of hats to go from boat crew to medic. And I think that's, you know, something that you're talking about here. And I wrote a post about it actually once on social media, and someone, okay, I do have a few job descriptions, as many adventure people do. It's what you do to make it work, to do what you love. But they said, maybe you should wear less hats, Amanda. And I was like, yeah, but in my world, I can't. I have to have two hats because I can't be walking around the super yacht with a stethoscope around my neck, because when you do that too, it builds a whole hospital culture that we don't want. That's a whole nother story. But yeah, I want to really speak to that and point out that even us medical professionals get really stressed in the aftermath when you're decombobulating and working out your feelings and what went on in that event. It takes a lot of energy to go from professional sportsman, guide, sailor, yachty to medic and then back. Would you agree?
100%. And how we're going to respond to a particular event isn't certain, even when we've had a lot of experience. I realized that before I could drive, I was 16 years old and I'd become an EMT so I could work with the local ambulance. And I had the experience of breaking lots of ribs, doing CPR on people who were pretty obviously dead. And that didn't really affect me or bother me, which I thought in itself was curious. Yet the couple times I would go to somebody my age, little older, little younger, and it was something like they were unlucky and got hit by a car on their bicycle or something like that, that had a real effect, because I knew that could have been me, or, you know, it was just different. And what you described was a great resilient strategy, in that you are sensing there is something different in me. And then you're asking, why? For what reason am I feeling this way now when I didn't before? And you're figuring that out. And then, you know, the obvious next step is, if this happens again, what can I do? Or it's just the understanding of that I'm likely to have that response. Is that going to be enough? So it's, you're looking at a beautiful feed forward loop to becoming more resilient by sensing and understanding what you're feeling, as opposed to going, this is a weird feeling, give me the whiskey.
Yeah.
Give me the margarita, you know, give me the purple tablets. Go, this is my body's response telling me something for some reason. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I loved how you described that.
Well, that's why I'm here today, I think. That a major impact. So if you could sum it up in like a couple of seconds, why do you think the world needs resilience training and to understand resilience right now more than ever before?
It's going to make us happier, safer people who make better decisions, both for ourselves, the people we're around, and our environment. So that's a very holistic way to kind of say we need to train ourselves to be more aware of ourselves and for what reason we sense things, what it means to us. Look at our colleagues, our friends, our clients, and try to understand them in a similar way. Bring them on board. Give them a few strategies. And that can be really subtle. But I think the people side of it, the resilience side of it, is something that has been a bit neglected, and modern society has moved at a pace that, without a doubt, evolution hasn't caught up. So as guides, it's very easy for me to work on helicopter safety, snowpack stability, avoid avalanche terrain, things like that. It's quite mechanical. There's still a science, a little bit of an art, just like in yachting. It's like you've got the boat, it's maintained. You got the weather forecasts, you kind of know what you're going into. That stuff's pretty mechanical. But yourself, your crew, your guests, I think that's where our greatest challenges come from now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I often think that after accidents, I can take the basic facts of what happened in the accidents in terms of terrain and snowpack and take that to a basic avalanche course, and they would just go, well, of course they shouldn't have been there. But they were. And so it all comes down to the human factors, like why we make the decisions we do, how we interact with each other, and how we communicate with each other is the real complex part of being human. But it's also probably the biggest and greatest reward. So I think we should all embrace it.
I totally agree. So my final question is, I'm preparing a super yacht crew. We're going through Patagonia down to Antarctica. We're going to be remote. We're going to have some quite demanding guests on board that are going to want to do some crazy things. If I could get you on board, or you could take us somewhere for 3 days, what would you give us in return terms of resilience training?
Well, if any of their crazy stuff involved getting off on shore and skiing, I'd do it along the way.
Yeah.
So just take me along. We can make it take more than 3 days. But if I had to do it not on site, then I think the biggest thing is learning what people need to support themselves and others. And a lot of that would be basic, when you're at your best, what is that like? What gets you there? How can I get back there if I need to? So that sort of teamwork, as well as some scenarios to prepare for and manage a crisis. And I guess how that's done would really depend on if we're in person or if we're over Zoom, remote, or if they decide to take me to Patagonia.
Perfect. Well, thank you
Maybe
so
perfect if I got to Patagonia.
And Gary is available for expeditions as well. Not too many though, because we've got quite a lot of work to do. because we
Right.
want to get this training out for all you guys. So we'll give you more details because we're working on that. It's all coming. But Gary, thank you so much for your time. It's been such an honor to speak to you, to share you with my community. And yeah, I look forward to us doing more talks like this in the future. Thanks everyone for listening. I'll put Gary's details below and we'll see you all really soon.
Thanks, Manda.
Thank you.